the king did not want to encourage him to become this great holy man. The king said, yeah, that's great. I like holy people as much as the next person. But I'm a king, my father was a king, his father was a king, so I want him to become a king. And what he did was he hatched this plan. And the plan was to basically keep Siddhartha, that was his name, Siddhartha was his first name. It's interesting, actually, it's a Sanskrit compound, siddha, like accomplishing, and artha means benefit, so accomplishing benefit. So Siddhartha Gautama was sort of like the clan name from the Shakya, the bigger Shakya clan. That's his full name. And he hatched this plan to never have the Bodhisattva, never have Siddhartha ever experience any kind of decay, or degradation, or death. Anything that might cause him to be disillusioned with worldly life, with the life of the senses. So he did that, and the stories say that he went to every end. He's a king, so he can afford to do these kind of things. So whenever the prince left the palace, he made sure that everything was spotless. Which in India today would be a feat, but in India 2,500 years ago is just unbelievable, right? So he went to all these ends to make sure that you never saw the pain or suffering of ordinary people. You only saw beautiful people outside the palace, young people, people in their prime, people thriving. Likewise, also in the palace, he had every kind of pleasure, essentially. Dancing girls, great food. Supposedly, people were not allowed to, if there was even a dead flower petal, you had to clean that up, and they would do all this at night. It's kind of like a weird version of the Truman Show or something. They're all like watching it. I don't know. Anyway, it worked for a while. Until one day, with his good friend Chana. Chana was his charioteer, his driver, essentially. He took an unplanned, unscheduled trip. And he said, Chana, let's go for a little ride. Chana knew what was going on. Chana kind of tried to dissuade him, but he's the prince, so he had to go. So they went together, and they went out on this journey. And the very first thing he encountered was somebody that was ill. And there's great quotes. He literally had never seen somebody that was ill because they were all hidden from him. And because he had this great karma, he had never experienced illness in his life. He was a young man by that time. And so he saw this ill man, he had no idea, and he asked Chana. And Chana said, well, that's sickness, he's sick. His body, the elements in his body are at disharmony, and it's great pain. And it struck the Bodhisattva. He thought, why hasn't this been brought to my attention before? And he has this conversation with Chana, and he comes to the realization that, yeah, that's going to happen, not just to me, but to everybody. This is a problem. This is an existential problem. That there's great suffering in life, and it's inevitable. So they continue going down the lane, and he sees somebody who is very old. Now, in India, if you've ever been to India, you can imagine very old doesn't mean, I'm retired and on the golf course. It means very, very old, decrepit, not in good health. Right? So that's what he saw. Somebody missing teeth and, barely, their senses are not there, on the edge of death almost. And they have the same kind of response. And I forgot to mention that he had actually been married and had a young son, even, by this time. And named Rahula. And he said, essentially, is this happening to everyone? And Chana said, yeah, that's you, your son, everyone you love. And all of a sudden, the pleasures of the palace didn't seem quite so sweet at that time. So the story goes that he went even farther until he saw somebody wrapped in a shroud going, much as they do in India today, to a funeral pyre. And and when you do that in India, it's usually the eldest son, if they're still alive, they carry them, or they're at least leading the procession, and then they go and they burn the body of their father or mother. And so he saw that, and he asked them, and that was the one that really shook his world. Death. Doesn't matter. My palace, everything that I have, everything that I am experiencing, all of my relationships are finite. They're going to be, there is an end to them. So they can't be the touchstone for any kind of lasting happiness, right? If happiness is lasting, how can something unlasting be the source of that joy? So he became very disillusioned. What Tibetans refer to as a renunciate mind. A mind of renunciation. He just thought it doesn't, all this stuff, all of these things are not in and of themselves satisfactory, not lasting. And so then he said, okay, take me home. And on his way home, he sees a shramanere, so not quite a monk, but a religious type person walking. And he notices, because he's been so sheltered, and he's very sensitive to people, he notices that this person has a sort of, I won't say a glow to it, but a palpable sense of peace to them. And he asks, again, Chana, what's going on? And Chana explains, and he thinks, that's it. That person, even though they may not have found what they're seeking, at least they're displaying some sort of happiness. At least they're on the right path. At least they haven't been ensnared by things that are by nature ephemeral. So he makes up his mind that night to leave the palace. And because he's the future Buddha, there's all kinds of magical happenings that happen. Normally he could not leave the palace, right? His father has created this whole empire designed to keep him from exactly what just happened, let alone leave the palace. Like that's, how's he going to get out? But the story goes that he was aided by a mist that put everybody to sleep. I have a theory. I think everybody was partying, and they were just really inebriated, and so it gets snuck out like that. But I'm sure it was probably a mist as well. So he sneaks out, and you can see that this. Where is it? Okay. So see this bottom right. He's riding a white horse, and you can tell he's still in princely garb. So he still has this. He still has long hair, and it's tied up in a top knot. He still has all of his princely robes, colorful robes. He's not wearing monastic robes. He's wearing a white horse that kind of blends in with the mist right there. And Chana's actually, he's the little guy right next to it that's sort of leading him along. Chana's going with him. He's his partner in crime. And he's leaving the palace. Leaving the palace. He's going in search of, he's not sure what, but some kind of spiritual understanding. So he leaves, and then you can see, so the thangka itself, the motif, these bigger figures, so 1, 2, and then there's one down here, those are connected to this main central figure. They're not within the story, the life story. It's these smaller figures, and you can see that he goes over here, down there on the bottom left, and he takes off all of his finery, all of his nice clothes. And he takes out his dagger, I think it's a gold dagger actually, and he cuts off his hair. That long hair at the time was a sign of royalty, a sign of his high caste. He was actually the second highest caste, the Kshatriya caste, the warrior caste. They were kings, basically. So he cuts off his hair, and he gives all that stuff back to Chana and the horse. And he says, "Go tell my father, tell my mother, and my wife and my son what I'm doing." And Chana begs and pleads for him to go with him, but he has the wisdom to know that if he would have allowed Chana to go with him, he would have used it as a little bit of something to reassure himself. And he was not into reassuring himself. He wanted to find reality in its stark nakedness. So he told Chana, no, you can't come with me. Now, at this point, this is where some Westerners say, the Buddha, he left his family. He left his baby and his wife. He's like like a deadbeat or something. And to that I have two responses. The first is, it's not like, she was a queen, she was well taken care of. And his son, the prince, would be next in line for the throne. So not so much a deadbeat. But then I say, more importantly, he wasn't the Buddha yet.
He wasn't what?
He was not the Buddha yet. He was not the Buddha yet. He was the Bodhisattva. He was still on the path at that time. If he was the Buddha at that time, why would you ever need to leave? There are plenty of enlightened beings that manifest as kings. You don't need to necessarily give up the thing that you're not attached to. So he wasn't the Buddha at that time. He was the Bodhisattva. And I'll go a step deeper that his motivation was one of compassion, not one of fear. So he wasn't afraid for just himself. He was actually motivated by compassion to help all sentient beings. Because that's what he kept thinking. These are the crux of the issues of existence. We should probably get to the bottom of that. Is this all that is? Is this all that matters in life? And so he's motivated out of compassion, not just for his son, not just for his wife, not just for his parents, but for everyone.